Me, self-knowing is certainly the first step of self-growing, but it's not enough. And I find, Goli, it doesn't actually take really large changes oftentimes for people to have a significant improvement in their quality of life and their outlook.
Hey there, I'm Goli Kalkaran, and this is Lessons from a Quitter, where we believe that it's never too late to start over. No matter how much time or money you've spent getting to where you are, if ultimately you are not happy, then it's time to get out. If you're feeling stuck and you feel like there's gotta be more, there's gotta be a way to feel fulfilled and excited about what you do, then this is the podcast for you. Each week, I will sit down with an inspiring guest who quit their professional career in order to forge their own path and create a life that they love. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode. I am so honored to have you join me again. Thank you for everyone that reaches out. I've been getting a lot of DMs and emails, and it really, truly means the world to me. Feel free to send me any questions or just reach out on Instagram at Lessons from a Quitter or shoot me an email at Goli@lessonsfromaquitter.com. And like I've mentioned before, I do a newsletter once a week. If you need some help, if you're trying to figure out what your next jump is going to be and you need motivation or some tools or tactics, I send out a newsletter once a week. Sign up at lessonsfromaquitter.com. Today's episode is really special and a little bit different. It is, part story. I have Montine Blank on, and I will tell you all about her in a second. And she, did the quitting thing and has gone on to do a lot of incredible stuff that we'll talk about. So, it is part what we typically do. But the reason I really wanted to have her on the show is because she is now a transformational life coach. And it comes up a lot on this podcast and in a lot of the self-help personal development world. A lot of people utilize coaches, and I really wanted to bring a coach on to talk about who should be working with a coach and how do you find a coach and why should we be interested in, life coaches. And so we get into all those questions and how that can help many of you on your journey. And I was looking for somebody that I knew was really good at what they were doing, because sometimes the problem with coaching is anybody can call themselves a coach. And so knowing, whether they actually get results for their clients was important. And on episode 31, we had Sheena Chang on the show. She quit her corporate life and has now created a successful business doing and teaching calligraphy online. And she actually is one of Montine's past clients, and Montine helped her when she was making this transition. And so I thought it was the perfect person. But one of the things before we dive in, the reason I think it's so important for everyone to kind of think about coaching and just investing in yourselves. The last two episodes, if you haven't listened, the beginning of the episode, I answered a question from a listener. And I'm in no way a coach, but what's interesting is a lot of times, even just writing down your own question or trying to explain it to somebody that you don't know really reveals a lot about what you're actually thinking or where the hangups are for you. And a lot of times we have blind spots, so we don't see that. And it just takes somebody else looking at it, I think. I know when I was reading those questions, it was really clear. A lot of times, we try to justify or say maybe I'll do this, or maybe, I'll do that thing over there. But in your question, you're saying I don't really want to do this, but maybe I could do it because I have experience. And, to someone that's an observer, they can say, well, if you don't want to do that, why would you even consider it, or something like that? And that, I think, is the importance of coaching. Is it really helps you, first of all, formulate your own thoughts, and to be able to explain it to someone else just requires you to really do some more self-reflection instead of pushing things down and just going about your day-to-day life. And it also helps somebody that doesn't have the same blind spots as you and can see you in a different light and isn't restricted by the same societal or familial or, whatever pressures you have. They can look and kind of really get to the heart of what the issue is. So that's why, I really am a big fan of any type of investment that will help you get to the core of whatever your issue is faster and help you along your way so you don't spend as much time in stuckness and in frustration. And so that was one of the reasons I really wanted to do this show. And I'm so excited to have Montine on. Now, she has done it all, from the corporate world to entrepreneurship to now transformational coaching. She has a vast array of experience that she utilizes to help her clients create meaningful and fulfilled lives. With an MBA, she started out at a large management consulting firm before deciding that she wanted a different future than that path provided. Her own jump took her down a successful entrepreneurial road where she founded numerous companies, including The Green Half, which is sort of like a Groupon for sustainable businesses that had over 10,000 subscribers, and The Green Plate, which was a nonprofit aimed at reducing disposable plastic consumption. She's also created 3 one-of-a-kind art businesses, Crazy Moon Art Room, T-shirt construction company, and Paint Awake. We talk a lot about how art and painting has helped her down her path of self-discovery and how she uses it with her clients. But because of her journey, she was led to wanting to get certified and becoming a transformational coach. And she now coaches clients on a wide variety of both life and career transitions in order to help them become more aligned with what they truly want. So, we get into all that and we get into whether coaching might be right for any of you listening. And so without further ado, let's jump in and talk to Montine. Hi, Montine. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Goalie.
I'm so excited to get into everything that you're doing and talk more and hopefully give people more of an insight of what coaching and life coaching and different aspects of it are. But you actually yourself, have the same kind of journey that we talk about a lot on this podcast where you started out in corporate. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your career and kind of how it's led you to where you are?
Yeah, I started out with Anderson Consulting. It's now called Accenture, but that's how long ago it was. And was doing management consulting straight out of International Business School and focused on their change management and executive training aspects of their client relationships. And I was there for 8 years. I had a good run there. I really liked a lot about the job and the people that I worked with. And I felt honored to be with some of the brains in that company and to see how wonderful a group of people can be when working towards a common goal. And I got to see that quite a lot. However, there was one night when I was with a group of people that had been in the firm at that point for many years and were high up in the hierarchy. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks that they were later in their years and they weren't spending time with their families. They were all still traveling a lot. And it almost seemed like they were still a little bit in competition with each other, even though they were already beyond the partner track. And I thought, gosh, I don't want to end up here. It was really that simple. It was just like, this isn't going to be fulfilling for me. It may be fulfilling for them, and that's fine. But it just really hit me. I got to see what life could be like if I stayed with it for another 20 years. And it didn't feel rewarding to my person.
I think that's something that a lot of people we've talked about on this podcast have kind of that same realization where they see people, 10 steps ahead of them and they think like, I don't really want to be there. So I do think a lot of people relate. It's interesting because I think a lot of other people, a lot of people that are stuck do see that. And yet it's so hard to get off that treadmill once you're on it, when you are in something quote unquote successful, that even though you notice that, it's just kind of like put these blinders on and keep going. So once you made that realization, was it kind of like an immediate, like, I'm getting out of this? Or did you start making a plan for like what you were going to do next?
Inside it was an immediate, I'm getting out of this, but I took steps. I think any time that you're going to make a huge transition in your life that you're in control of, it's best if you can make decisions for yourself and your future and your career when you're not stressed. And so if you make that, leap of faith, right? Jump off into whatever happens. That might sound exhilarating, but it's actually incredibly stressful. And so what I did was I changed my career from being full-time to a contractor. And then I hired people underneath me to work through me to work for Accenture. And that gave me free time then a couple days a week to start moving in other directions. And so I went in very different directions. I went into a way of using art as an intuitive process for self-knowing and personal development. Wow. I trained in what's called intuition painting for a couple of years and set off in different directions from that point. But it was not an immediate flip the switch. Now, if someone had life savings goalie and they were, they'd set aside money to do something like that, that's fine. But I think a slow and more cautious approach to change in a situation like that is probably better for most people, so that they're making decisions that are healthy for themselves, not based in fear.
Right. I agree. And I think that most people that tend to be in these traditional roles that are more rule followers or type A personalities, I think that you're right, that it can cause an unbelievable amount of stress to kind of jump without knowing exactly what you're going to do or having at least some kind of direction. So I think a lot of people probably agree that they would rather kind of take baby steps. So when you got into this type of art, were you an artist before? I mean, did you have an inkling of going into this, or was this like something new that you wanted to try?
I had not really been in making art at that point for 10 years. I had been invited to an intuitive painting class, I think a year or two before, and it was very eye-opening to watch people expressing themselves freely and really enjoying themselves and being in the moment and getting into the zone. And it was such a new world for me. It was the opposite of rule following, right? It was true exploration and play. And that just stuck in my heart somewhere. And so when I wanted to make the transition, it wasn't that I thought that's my direction. I applied to myself what I was applying to my change management consultants at the time. And I wrote a personal mission and vision statement. And what came out of that was that my mission was to help people heal and better themselves using creativity as a means, and to teach others how to use creativity to that purpose. So it was frankly shocking for me that came out. That's not what I expected. But that's what I find is so exciting about beginning an effort in coaching yourself or working with a coach at all, is the discovery. Right? Because you have had blinders on, like you said, and you are seeing one direction for yourself. And when you get rewarded in that particular industry or role, you're not sure that you can apply those skills or interests in other arenas. So yeah, that came out of my own, like I said, mission and vision statement. Not that I knew I was going there, but I'm very glad I did.
I want to touch on that coaching statement in a little bit when we get to, what you're doing now, because I agree with you 100%. I think we all have this experience. Like, you can give better advice to your friend if you see your friend dating someone. Like, when you're standing, outside of that situation, it's a lot easier to assess it than when you're in it. It's the same thing. When you're doing something, when you've done something and you feel stuck, it's so hard for you to see everything. And it's just a lot easier working with someone that can help take off the blinders of certain things that you don't see within yourself. So we'll definitely get into all that. But quickly back to the painting. The reason I asked whether you did it is that so many of us, like myself, I had told myself for so long that I'm not a creative person. Like, I don't have any creative bone in my body. And I wouldn't naturally think, if I'm going to quit, then I'm going to start taking like creative arts classes, or I'm going to paint, or I'm going to do, whatever it is, graphic design, or I'm going to try different like artistic things. But having gone through this process, I started picking up a lot of things that I realized, hey, maybe I'm not going to make it into a career, but I enjoy it. And I have discovered a lot about myself through that. And so I guess, want your advice, going through even those art classes and stuff, like what you think maybe somebody that is stuck in these types of careers, how they can benefit from kind of just giving themselves that space to try creative outlets, even if it's not as an ends to getting out of their career.
I think everyone is creative. I'm not going to say everyone is going to go out in the world and become a fine artist, but not everybody's going to go out in the world and become a quarterback.
Right.
Go out in the world and win the Tour de France, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't ride a bicycle. So I feel the same way about creativity. And I think that people have a modality that really speaks to them. And if they listen to themselves and pay attention, they can find that modality. It could be movement, it could be dance, it could be drawing, it could be writing music, it could be, there's a lot of different things it could be. 3-dimensional, painting, etc. And you don't necessarily know where you are going to flow best until you try it. So it ends up opening up different channels in your brain, giving yourself room to express and explore, like I mentioned before. It's like working on your whole brain instead of the part of your brain that's been used for furthering your career, for example. In a way, it is allowing you to tap into new parts of yourself, no matter what creative endeavor you do, so long as we're not talking about, paint by numbers.
Right.
My experience with visual arts has been that the imagery can be a bit like a diary or an oracle even, especially when it comes from your intuition and you're not painting something that you're staring at, but you're just letting yourself express freely. I think that's when the juiciest revelations come forth.
Yeah. So how did you go from kind of taking this time and exploring this painting and then to moving into what you're doing today, like as a coach?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, first of all, when I made the transition and started training in the intuition painting, it was 1999. So it's been a minute. I initially started doing that work, that kind of soulful artistic expression work, because it was such a delight for me that I wanted to share it with others. And I knew it was eye-opening and heart-opening and possibility-opening. And so I set up a studio in my home and I taught classes. And eventually I moved into the basement of a church and called it the Crazy Moon Art Room and offered other art courses as well, basically to support this work. From there, I really got the entrepreneur bug. And I ended up starting another business called the T-Shirt Construction Company, where local artists from Atlanta could have their work in the shop, and I would have T-shirts, and people could come in and put local art on T-shirts or bring their own art in, and we would have art shows, and we would have art parties. That was a really, really fun time. And then we moved out of that space, and I lost interest a little bit in the T-shirt movement and found myself pulled to concerns about single-use disposable plastics, and ended up helping start or co-launched a nonprofit that encouraged restaurants in Atlanta to replace their styrofoam and plastic to-go serviceware with bio options. And from there, I started the Green Half, which was a green version of Groupon. And that way I could promote businesses in Atlanta that had, been working towards sustainability and raise awareness for people to frequent them more often, for example, than other options. And then I sold that business and moved to New York and became an account executive for Big Fuel, servicing social media interests for Samsung and Budweiser. And that was really fun. And through all of that, I never gave up my love for this intuition painting. So I then came back to intuition painting, relaunched that business in California. And that's where I met Sheena, doing an intuitive watercolors teaser class. And I had kind of been aware of coaching out in the world at that point for about, 10, 15 years. Part of it called to me, but part of it hadn't, because I didn't feel completely comfortable with the background of some of the coaches that I'd met. And it made me skeptical of what they could offer someone who is a C-suite level, right? If they had not really had too much of a career experience themselves. And it was only when I found this kind of coaching in particular called transformational coaching that something really shifted in my appreciation for coaching. And that was that this kind of coaching didn't just help you come up with a list of to-dos and cheer you on and have worksheets to fill out, but it actually got into the subconscious or the psyche of people enough for them to recognize the fears that were stopping them from reaching their goals. And that was tremendous for me.
Yeah.
And that's when I became interested in training. And so I think it was 2011 or 12 that I did a 2-year or a year and a half something program. It was pretty intense and in depth around transformational life coaching. And through that process, Goalie, I realized I had been coaching since 1999 doing the intuition painting. I just didn't realize that I'd been using the painting as a mirror for the painter, and that was causing this incredible, tool for self-reflection, self-awareness, hidden stories. Just, it was a wonderful revelation.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, like how that could be a tool of figuring out parts that are hidden within you and how that goes so hand in hand with this type of transformational coaching. But going back to what you just said, I think that's what a lot of people have a problem with coaching. I think especially in traditional careers, it's really easy right now with social media when you go on and everybody is a life coach, and it's like every 23-year-old, has become some kind of coach. And I think a lot of people feel very skeptical of like, okay, how are these people going to help me? But I've, also now kind of doing this work and talking to so many people, I've seen so many people that have had such great results with coaches. And so how can people know, like if somebody does desperately want help being guided, they feel a little lost, like how do you find a coach that works for you, that you trust, that you feel good about?
Well, I'm going to make a weird analogy, but I think it's kind of the difference between, a short order cook and a master chef, right? If you want to learn something about cooking, you can go to a short order cook and learn how to make burgers and fries, and they're going to have tools and tricks for you to learn how to make that. But if you go to a master chef who's had more training and experience, you're going to have a more well-rounded coaching experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with what you're going to learn from the short order cook, even if it's somebody who went to a very short coaching training. I'm not going to discount that, because the truth is most people don't make time to reflect on themselves. And so any bit of feedback they get, if it's from someone who's doing it right, is good. Right? And not everybody can afford what some coaches charge. As long as it's someone who's been through a good training program, and it wasn't, I will say the unfortunate thing is some training programs are like a weekend long, right?
Right.
And that's really not enough training. If you're going out looking for a coach, you do want someone who went through somewhat of a rigorous training program. I'm not going to put any time on it, but I just think a weekend's too short.
Right.
And I would prefer to have someone who has had a varied career experience. That's just me, though. I have worked with, many years ago when coaching first came out, I had a friend who was going to coaching training, and he came over with some worksheets, and I did find myself saying, oh, wow, I do have these 3 things that I need to work on. There were still ahas.
Right.
The only thing I will say around that, Goalie, and I'm sure you can appreciate this, is insights and ahas are cheap. They're easy to come by. The work comes in trying to make change.
That's actually interesting. I hadn't thought of it like that. And I think you're right. I think that it's just that those ahas feel so good. Sometimes when you feel like, oh, I revealed something that seems like what you're going for. But I can totally see what you mean, that it's kind of the work after that to figure out what to do.
Self-knowing is certainly the first step of self-growing, but it's not enough. And I find, Goalie, it doesn't actually take really large changes oftentimes for people to have a significant improvement in their quality of life and their outlook. So while sometimes insights can feel overwhelming, I just find time and time again that, some people only need to make small shifts to feel a lot better about where they are and how they're handling life and where they're going.
Who should be going to a life coach? Is it like when you're stuck at a career, or when you have a specific problem, or is it just anybody kind of trying to figure out your blind spots? I know that was a tough one. I'm not.
No, it's not a tough one. I'm just trying to think realistically about my experience with my clients. And I don't think I've had a client come just to figure out their blind spots. Usually, we're ready to make change when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of trying to make a change, right? So, yeah, I don't get a lot of people that are interested in their blind spots. I think what happens is, and I've heard this more recently than I did when I first started coaching years ago, people will go out and get a few self-help books or listen to a few podcasts, and they want to make the change, but they run up against the wall of habit and routine and, stasis. And so that's when I think it's especially helpful when you've gone as far as you can go, and you are interested in making change that is going to be more permanent, not temporary, and doesn't require a cheerleader, at all times to make the change, but something that you would do for yourself and implement, and it would stick.
My experience with coaching and what everybody I have seen that has done it, and the reason I'm such an advocate for it, is that I think that, like you were just saying, you're starting to make that journey. And a lot of times, like, maybe you can do it on your own. It's just going to take you, 3-5 times longer because you don't know what you don't know. And I think a lot of times with coaching, it's just nice to have somebody that can make that learning curve a little bit shorter and can kind of help you along that path that you want to go on, like, so desperately. But, there's just going to be too many stumbling blocks along the way. Would you agree with that?
I would say that's like the tip of the iceberg, right? That's certainly the time to go to coaching when you are not comfortable with where you are and you've made some efforts to make change and you're not getting to go into the direction. But I think for everyone, there are the things you can see. There are the things that I can see that you can't see. There are the things we both see about you, and there's the things that neither one of us see about you. So it's good for you to explore for yourself, like I said, using whatever materials you find online or otherwise. But there are just going to be things that a good coach is going to be able to hear in the way that you say things and be able to reflect back to you in ways that you would not even recognize you're saying, that can be incredibly powerful. And there are also tools and assessments that I use with my clients that I find to be kind of jump starters in our process. I'm not interested in spending 19 hours to get to know your life story, frankly. I want to get to where you want to get to. And so for me, having 3 or 4 assessments up front before we even have our first meeting allows me to get rid of a lot of the small talk and get into information that's going to be both insightful for you, but also give you a break. And by that, I mean, I work with a lot of people who think they're supposed to be something they're not. And that's a lot of pressure.
Right.
And when you do the correct assessments, at least in my estimation, you can realize, hey, I'm not an accountant because it's not my personality type. It's not in my Strengths Finder assessment. It's not my values. It doesn't match me. And that can be a huge relief for someone who's been in a misguided career, for example. Yeah, I think it can be a very rich experience. And as far as how you use coaching, I have some people who come to me for 6 weeks. That's it. They know exactly what they want. We work it out and they're done. And I have some people who've been coaching with me for 4 years because we go beyond the initial career transition and maybe we only meet once a month, but we just do a check-in, make sure that they're living in a way that is really healthy and compassionate for themselves.
Yeah, I love what you were just talking about, kind of with people giving them that permission that like maybe this isn't right for you. I think a lot of times just that validation is so powerful because I don't know why a lot of times we are seeking permission from other people, but I think you may know something about yourself, like you don't fit in a certain career or lifestyle or whatever, but you so desperately feel like you need to do that or you need to be that for somebody. And it's so powerful when someone kind of gives you that permission to say like, hey, like, this isn't for you. And it takes that pressure off to be like, yeah, I can admit that this isn't for me now.
Yeah, that's one of those things, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So to me, an analogy of that is when you're outside enjoying a summer day and all of a sudden someone's air conditioning stops and you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea how much that wasn't working for me.
Right.
Right? That's the experience I had when I left corporate America. I didn't realize how much I had felt like a fish out of water, even though I was incredibly successful. Yeah. For me, it wasn't freedom. I had no freedom. And that's one of my highest values is being able to have choices for myself.
Yeah. And so I know it's obviously varied with your clients, but typically when you work with someone, like how often or what is the amount of time that people typically like should put in with a coach? Or is it just varied depending on what you want?
One of my philosophies around coaching is that I am not the guru in the room. I don't want to become a crutch for my clients. So I trust their judgment. I'm not someone who has a program, for example, that, it lasts 6 months and it costs this much. I really like to meet people where they are. And that's what I was saying when I was talking about how some people are work with me for 6 months because they have a specific thing they want to work through. And some people work on a broader level for longer amounts of time. I think it's disempowering in my realm, in my world. It's disempowering for me to prescribe a coaching plan for someone, right? I mean, first of all, you need to figure out if there's chemistry between you and a coach. It should feel right. You should not feel judged. You should not feel confused or inadequate or insecure or even stressed and unable to talk. You should feel like this person has my back and this person gets me. And I really like what this person is saying to me. It should feel comfortable.
The amount of time, let's say there is that connection, it's just sort of dependent on what your goal is with the coaching, right? So whether it would be a 6-month thing, a 6-week thing, or a year long, it's just dependent on, I guess, the work that you want to do. It's
really case by case. And I've started out with some people who I have a client from London right now who we worked together 2 years ago for a few months. And now he's got another thing we're working on. I haven't talked to him, in between. So I really trust that people will know when they need their coach.
Yeah.
Again, I want to empower someone to make their own decisions about coaching. Coaching is about empowering.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love that, you mentioned this earlier, and I don't know if you can talk a little bit more about it because this comes up a lot on the podcast is, I think a lot of times people are so worried about finding a plan, figuring out the steps, figuring out, I think a lot of times in type A personalities or just in these traditional roles, you feel better where it's okay, I just have to figure out the finances of this, or I got to figure out what I'm going to do next and what I need to take these steps. But what has come up over and over again in every episode that I've done with every guest is that most of this is just mental. It's most of it is it's not even like figuring out that plan. It's getting over the self-doubt, getting over the fear and worrying about what other people think and all this other stuff and all this internal work. And then, once you can build that confidence in yourself that you can do it, like the plan is just secondary. And I think you were talking about that when you found transformational coaching as opposed to other types of coaching, which might be more of like, these are the steps that you need to do. So can you talk a little bit about your experience with that, like with your clients and how you kind of approach that mindset versus, an actual plan?
It's all about what people are thinking. I mean, what you think is who you are. We live in a world where you could really do anything, anywhere, at any time. And the things that you're pulled to are probably the things that are right for you. And I know that sounds so cliche, but it's true. I mean, I never, had the desire to be a tennis coach, right?
Right.
So I don't go by that standard saying of you can do anything. I think you can do anything you want to do because you want to do it for a reason.
Right.
When I'm working with people, I have several areas that they might want to dive into. Again, I don't have a program, but I look through assessments, and not just tools, but talking. There are certain things that I want to know about people when they were younger, when they were purer, right? Before they were inundated with social norms and societal expectations and familial pressure, right? I want to talk to that person. And through that, I want to go through a stage where we reveal, like hidden influencers and what fears are there and what could be blocking them. And that's what you're kind of talking about.
Yeah.
Once you find those things, you have to evolve. That's what I meant where I said insights and ahas are cheap. They are, because the work comes in that next part when you have to retrain your response to triggers and really question your doubts and move beyond that and act as if and stand in courage and do it for yourself and do it because you have one life to live and do it because why not? Right? I mean, that's it. It's your life. This is your one life. And if there's more, you won't remember it, apparently. So stick with this one for a minute, right?
Right.
And it helps you like manage those emotional stoppers and take steps that feel right, that are manageable and doable for you. And it doesn't mean that you have to have the whole plan sorted out, but you have to feel confident in yourself to take any step, much less all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's just the whole game. I mean, I know that for myself, but now having talked to so many people in these positions, and it's funny, it's like nobody knows what they're doing. It's just everyone is kind of taking that next step and then the next one. And it's really just having that confidence that you'll figure it out and being able to get over the mental hurdles.
Yeah. And life just gets broader and broader and lighter and more expansive and more opportunities. And when you open up, it opens up. Once people get to that place where they start having the courage to try, then it's all about putting the elements in place to support them. And that could mean saying no to certain relationships. Right? It could mean changing an environment. There could be things in your life that are hindering you beside yourself.
Absolutely. I think there is in all of our lives. A couple of final questions. I think that a lot of people, one of the things that keeps them stuck or even thinking, why would I go to a coach is so many people feel like once they've done one thing, they can never do anything else. Or that I think a lot of times, especially in this day and age with the internet and how much opportunity there is, a lot of people that have like had the blinders on and have been in their own traditional like roles don't really realize how many different ways there are to just make a living or make, to try something else. But we're so programmed that like you have to have a degree and you have to, go into this field and then work your way up. And so I think a lot of people that I hear the number one question is like, I have no idea what I would do. Is there like some homework or something that people can do to kind of figure out what they would be able to do next, or like what is in the realm of possibility for them if they've been stuck in one thing for, 10, 15, 20 years?
The main thing they need is objective self-reflection, and that means getting out of their heads. And so even something as simple as going on and taking an online test for the Myers-Briggs or something similar, just to learn about themselves. And again, that starts getting to the place where you're letting go of the things that aren't you and not feeling guilty about them and feeling more confident in the things that are your gifts. I also find that people tend to take their gifts for granted.
Yeah.
Oftentimes the direction people I work with end up going are so aligned with who they are, and we're so naturally part of their preferred ways of living that they can't see it. So one of the ways that I work with them to help that is to look back at what you enjoyed before you were 12. It's amazing how much information you can get through a self-study, it doesn't take very long, about what called to you when you were younger.
Absolutely. And I've done something similar. What I've heard, and it's worked, I think is incredible, is like asking the people that are closest to you, like what you're best at or what they come to you for. Because a lot of times, like you were just saying, we're so blind to our own skills because it comes so easily.
Yes.
And then other people tell you like, oh, you're the best listener. Or, I come to you for whatever. And you start realizing like they're literally natural skills for you. And so that just like should lead you kind of in a certain direction.
Yeah, it's like the person who is a librarian but plans events every weekend, and that's really where they put every waking hour when they're not at a library.
Right.
And then they wake up that they could be an event planner, but they didn't take it seriously because it was just something they loved to do.
Yeah, I think this is wonderful. I think this has been super helpful. I don't know if you have any other like parting advice or words or resources that people can maybe check out if they're interested in starting coaching or even starting down that path of self-discovery. I know you've already given a ton of advice, so.
I think one of the things that has been helpful is something that is actually probably, 20 years old now, but from The Artist's Way, especially for creative types or dormant creative types, morning pages. Do you remember those exercises called morning pages?
I'm familiar with them, but I have recently only learned about them. I never knew about them before. And so you can kind of explain it because I think a lot of people probably have never heard of it.
Well, okay, first of all, you should Google morning pages because I'm my version of them when I haven't read it in many, many years. But when I used to do them, I would wake up in the morning and just kind of empty my brain on a piece of paper, handwritten, not typed out, single space, few pages, and just let every thought that came into my mind, every worry, every reflection, every hope, everything, just what came out until I felt complete. And then I would go back and after a week and look through and just see if there were any recurring patterns. And it was just another way of self-reflection. It's like we don't always hear what we're saying. And so you start noticing that you use phrases or you come back to a certain topic or it's observation. It goes back to something you said before. It's like trying to become objective instead of subjective, right? Trying to see yourself from the outside in. So that might be an easy way. It's free. It doesn't require, a lot of time. It's actually good for you.
Yeah.
For someone to just start paying attention to themselves.
Yeah, I love that. I think that is actually like a very powerful tool that anybody you can Google. I think it's Julia Cameron wrote The Artist's Way and Morning Pages. I did that like years ago, but I should start it again because it is very helpful. Well, thank you so much, Montine. This has been super helpful. Where can people find you if they're interested in getting in touch and maybe exploring some coaching options?
Oh, sure. You can find me and more information about coaching in general at themoreyou.com. So that's more, MOREUYOU.com.
I'll link to that in the show notes in case people can't write it down right now. I'll have links to that and to maybe like your contact information so that people can find it in the show notes for this episode. But thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on. I think that this has actually been very helpful.
Well, thank you. And thank you for doing what you're doing, Goldie. I just think it's so important for people to recognize something beyond where they are if it's not working for them. So thank you for the work you're doing in the world.
Oh, thank you. That's so kind of you to say. I appreciate that. Okay, so here are my takeaways from all of the incredible advice that Montine gave us. One, take baby steps. I know for a lot of us, we may fantasize about just like storming in one day and quitting and never looking back. But the reality of it is that the more you can plan and make the transition smoother, the less stress will be on you. And the more you're likely to succeed in whatever you're jumping to because it won't be as scary. So really, if you feel stuck, instead of staying in that stuckness, start just working on things on the side and start working on your plan, whether it's financial, whether it's getting your spouse on board, whether it's figuring out what it is you want to do. Those baby steps can really go a long way. 2, I said this in the beginning and we talked a lot about it. Coaching is about taking the blinders off. We've all been programmed and we have certain influences in our life. And so it makes it really hard to see what is possible, what is out there, what we are capable of. And it really what coaching at the heart of it does is just holds a mirror up to you and lets you see who you are truly without all this other baggage and what you're capable of. And that in and of itself is so powerful. And 3, what I loved when Montine said is what you think is who you are. And so a lot of this, we've talked a lot about this on the show, but changing your mindset, changing the thoughts that you have, changing like what you think is possible. I mean, that really is all of it. And if you can do that, then you will soon see how capable you are of really accomplishing whatever it is you want and not being beholden to what other people think and living a life that's more aligned with you. So with that, I hope this episode helped, and I will see you on the next episode. Thank you so much for listening. I can't tell you how much it means to me. If you liked the podcast, please rate and review us on iTunes. It'll help other people find the show. If you want to connect or reach out, follow along on Instagram and Facebook at Lessons from a Quitter and on Twitter at Quitter Podcast. I would love to hear from you guys, and I'll see you on the next episode.